Okay guys, welcome back to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode I take a look at the 2001 movie Planet of the Apes with Mark Wahlberg and others. It has a 44% on the tomato meter and a 27% on the audience score. It is completely rotten. It is completely ridiculous. It is actually an insult to the audience's intelligence. It is directed by Tim Burton. Tim Burton has made some great movies. He was absolutely the wrong director to do a Planet of the Apes comeback of sorts. It is completely bad. Tim Burton should be ashamed of himself. The actors aren't really at fault here. Tim Burton is. His script is bad. His overindulgence in wanting to make endless verbal line readings as callbacks to the first film of 1968. It's completely stupid and off-putting. He's even got a cameo appearance by Charlton Heston as an ape, not in the credits. It's an uncredited role. It's completely stupid and another callback to 68 with a bad line reading. It's completely cringeworthy. At the time this came out, I remember not seeing it in the theater. I saw it only when it came out on satellite TV. People that I knew that had seen this were somehow impressed by it. I don't know why. Maybe just the flashiness of the CGI. I don't know how they were impressed with this because when I saw it, I just couldn't sit through it the first time. I don't think I actually sat all the way through this until years later when it was on a cable channel of some or satellite channel of some kind. And I actually sat through it all while I was doing something else because it wasn't enough to hold 100% of my interest. This thing's a complete dud. It's illogical and insulting. I mean, within the first 5 minutes of the film, it insults your intelligence. You have NASA astronauts on a space station, not around Earth, but around Jupiter, I guess, or Saturn. It's somewhere else in the solar system. In any case, they're on this space station and they're training apes or they're training chimpanzees to be astronauts. Why, I don't know. That's not explained. They want them to pilot ships, I guess, because it's less of a risk of man and resources to have chimps flying spaceships for some reason. But in any case, they refer to these as monkeys. They're chimpanzees. And the astronauts do the most illogical things, and somehow we're left to believe it's all serious. For example, Mark Wahlberg gets into his spaceship for the first time to rescue one of these chimps, and he doesn't even fasten his helmet. He just throws it on top of his head and just flies off. It's ridiculous stuff like this that just plagues this movie all the way through. It's almost like they did things on the first take. They did them half-ass, and somebody must have seen this. Certainly they saw this in the editing room, but they left this stuff in there. They didn't want to redo it or do retakes or fix these problems. So you have these glaring, ridiculous, over-the-top plot holes just left in the movie, and they insult our intelligence. Within 5 minutes of the movie, we're insulted already as to we must be really stupid to think these are astronauts. I mean, the whole premise of this thing is insulting to begin with. But as the story continues, Mark Wahlberg's astronaut, he goes and tries to rescue a chimp that's, lost flying into some kind of magnetic gravitational anomaly of some kind. He goes into this anomaly and pops out on an alien planet, crashes there, and we get the Planet of the Apes story, mostly the story that we know, except this is not Earth. This is like some kind of alien planet that just happens to have been dominated by different types of apes, and also that happens to have humans. However, in this film, the slaves, the human slaves, have perfect English. They look perfect. They're in perfect health. In fact, all the apes, all the different types of apes and the humans speak perfect English, and I do mean perfect English, even with colloquialisms that Mark Wahlberg and the modern 2001 audience would know. It's completely strange, but you can hand wave one of these type of weird things away in a sci-fi film, so that's not the biggest flaw with the movie. There are just a countless other flaws, like the acting is just atrocious. Not necessarily Mark Wahlberg, but the other characters playing the apes, some of them go completely crazy over the top and they're almost cartoonish as villains, like the main villain ape, for example. Others are just boring and off-putting, and although the makeup is far superior to the 1968 film and works in that regard, just the actors that they chose to be underneath these ape CGI or makeup costumes don't seem to work. They're kind of off-putting and weird because you recognize just enough of them that you don't believe that they're apes. It's very cringe-worthy in a lot of ways. We're going to go over even more bad things as I get right into the audience reviews. Again, this movie is relevant enough to bag on. We've got a review from October 20 of 2019, half a star. If having your intelligence insulted is your thing, then this is the film for you. The year is 2029, and explorers have eschewed the use of robots to perform dangerous space missions in favor of chimpanzees. Why? Because the producers needed to shoehorn an ape into the opening scene of this pathetic attempt to cash in on the original franchise. Instead of good writing, we get lavish special effects, and instead of actors, we get Marky Mark Wahlberg, proving once again that his acting abilities, yeah, so they're bagging on Mark Wahlberg too. Nah, he's the least of the film's problem. It's got so many other problems that Mark Wahlberg, I mean, I'll get to that if I can get to all the other problems first, but he's not the biggest problem. I would say that this is yeah, it's a 1 star, half a star to 1 star. I might agree with the half a star because a movie was made, but it's an insulting movie to me. And 1 star maybe because, you know, the effects, the prosthetic effects on the apes were good for the time. But, you know, I can criticize the CGI too because a lot of it's very dark and dim, and some of it you can't tell if it's daytime or nighttime. It's kind of in a twilight looking light, and I'm suspecting that's to cover up the CGI, which to me, even at the time, the CGI looked a little blurry and kind of amorphous, and I've heard people praise it, but I don't see the praise. It just looks really dimly lit to me, and that's like, you know, commonly used to cover up problems with the CGI. Half a star. This movie is awful, but you know what? I could forgive it all if it wasn't for the completely absurd ending. Mark Wahlberg escapes the planet of the apes and finally returns home to Earth, only to discover it is a second freaking planet of apes. Marky Mark somehow manages to land his ship right on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And guess what? The memorial is now an ape. But he's not just any old monkey, it's General Thade. Oh yeah, and by the way, this planet of apes has somehow, yeah, that's really bizarre. You know, in the 68 film, it works perfectly because the big twist at the end is Charlton Heston discovers he is not on an alien world. He is on Earth, but an Earth that's post-apocalyptic, and now the apes are in charge. It's great. The 68 film is fantastic. I highly recommend it. This movie, its version of that is that Mark Wahlberg actually succeeds in going back to Earth from this alien planet, and when he gets to Earth, yeah, he lands, you know, on the mall in Washington, and everybody's an ape. Yeah, it's still modern society, just like the one we know in 2001, except everybody's an ape. The police are apes. The government is made up of apes. Lincoln was an ape. Wow. And it also, yes, it brings up the weird thing that you know, this villain character in on the alien planet, this General Thade, who's an ape, an over-the-top mustache-twirling type of villain. He is actually the Abraham Lincoln ape that Mark Wahlberg finds back on Earth. But never mind that this is like an alien planet completely disconnected from Earth. It makes no sense. It's not a plot twist. It's just a big middle finger to the audience, deliberately there just to push a middle finger in the audience's face at the very end of the movie, as though they weren't already disappointed enough in what they had seen. So if I had seen this in the theater and that had happened to me, I sure as hell wouldn't be telling people where I worked that I enjoyed it, but yet people were telling me that they enjoyed this where I worked. I have no idea what they were thinking, because when I saw this thing, I didn't know whether to laugh or just shake my head. I wanted to rewind it and just make sure I thought I saw what I think I saw. 2.5 stars, not terrible, but very Tim Burton. Well, no, Tim Burton is terrible in this. Tim Burton casts some of the people he likes to cast, like Helen Bonham Carter. And you know, I'll mention this because it's kind of weird, and it got weirder when I heard the backstory behind this. Tim Burton, you know, he sets up in this movie just a hint that there's a romantic interest between the ape played by Helen Bonham Carter and Mark Wahlberg's astronaut. There's just a hint of a love triangle going on between a human and an ape here. Tim Burton actually wanted to have a full-on, scene, or a scene showing that the ape and Mark Wahlberg's astronaut had had sex, that they were that they had actually consummated their love, and the studio executives told him to forget about this. And the idea that Tim Burton even wanted to do that, and that he actually left a little bit of that in the movie as a taste for the audience, suggests to me that Tim Burton was high on something when he did this movie, but it didn't make the movie better. It completely derailed this into the dumpster. This is a dumpster of a movie. It literally is. No, not literally, but it is figuratively a trash dumpster of the highest magnitude. Half a star. Planet of the Apes is the worst film of 2001. Probably, yeah. I mean, I don't recall all the other movies, but of actual big budget movies in the theater, this probably, yeah, it was probably the worst one. 4 stars. Not as bad as many think, but it is a movie with a lot of flaws. To be honest, though, I prefer this to the CGI trilogy that lacked any impact or emotion, since this movie felt like the original one, though Mark Wahlberg was a terrible actor at that point in his career, and it shows greatly. Tim Roth and the whole makeup department, as well as the awesome score, steal the show and make this movie a joy for me to watch. Compared with the remakes of today, this is actually not that bad. It's hard to believe this is a review from July of 2019. We have had a Planet of the Apes trilogy that concluded a year or two ago. It was fantastic. In fact, the last Planet of the Apes movie is universally liked. It's got high scores even on Rotten Tomatoes from everybody. It was great. I thought it was the best Planet of the Apes movie of all time, except maybe for the original. And I say that because it worked on every emotional level. It wasn't just that the CGI was better on the last movie. It was that it emotionally worked. It logically worked. You were invested in this thing. It had a satisfying ending. You walked away from this knowing how great it was. You felt great. And that was true not only in the theater, but when people watched this on streaming and etc. at home. So for this reviewer in 2019 to say this is better, he is high on the same stuff Tim Burton was on. He is out of his mind. 1.5 stars, aka Tim Burton sells his soul to Hollywood. Or he sold his soul to the cocaine dealer or something. 1.5 stars. This movie was weird. Everything about it looked right, but there were several plot points that were scattered throughout that didn't make sense. I've seen it a couple of times and I don't remember a thing about it. The only thing that I do remember was its lackluster ending with President Lincoln's statue as an ape. It doesn't make any logical sense. Some parts with the apes attacking was good, but it doesn't work for me. Yeah, you're being too kind. It's very forgettable. It's boring. It tries to deliver all these one-liners harkening back to, actual lines from the 1968 film, but it does it in the worst, most cringy ways, in the worst parts, and delivered by the worst characters. It is completely insulting to the original film. 2.5 stars. I liked this as a kid, but I absolutely hate it now. I will be a bit forgiving in my rating, however, because the visuals are good and it somewhat kept the ending of the book. I don't know what the book ending was, but the book was a fail if it had the ending from this film, because this ending in this film is a complete disconnect from the actual film. Logically, it's illogical. 2 stars. This movie underperformed in almost every measure possible. I really had to strain my attention span to finish this one. I feel bad for Charlton Heston. How did he get tricked into this remake? Costume and makeup are one of the only things well done. The ending is terrible. Yeah, I agree with almost all of that. 0.5 star. Tim Burton's reimagining of Planet of the Apes succeeds in terms of makeup and costume designing, but falls completely flat on its face with its script, acting, and direction. 100% agree. 1 star. Tim Burton's worst film, one of the worst remakes ever in film history. I'll largely agree on that. 3 stars. I know most people did not like this movie, but it was not that bad. If we look at it as if it was a reboot rather than a remake, then the story is great. Let's just pretend the original 5 movies were not made and this was the first of its kind. Not sure how it would have done in the box office, but for what it is, I really enjoyed it. Well, you don't have to worry about wonder what it did at the box office. That's readily available. available, even on Rotten Tomatoes, it didn't do so hot. So moving on. 1.5 stars. Welcome to a world where apes rule and their pet humans can talk but still act stupid, but aren't stupid, just bad actors. Yeah, it's completely illogical. The humans are, they're like the animals on the planet, yet they have perfect English and they're perfectly clean and they are perfectly intelligent. This is ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. 1.5 stars. This is so clingy. The effects are horrible. I can't even take it seriously. I think they mean cringy, then I'll agree. Half a star. Tim Burton's reimagining of Planet of the Apes succeeds in terms of makeup and okay. We've read that. 1 star. It's better to remain silent. That thing. Yeah, they could have done that. They could have had the humans, like the original 1968 film, they were silent because they couldn't speak. That was certainly more believable than this. In this one, not only do they speak, they have perfect English. They come across as they're college-educated humans, really. Um, Completely bizarre. 1 star. Only deserves 1 star for adding outer space, but there is still no backdrop on the apes' creation. Yeah, it doesn't attempt to explain how apes went from chimpanzees that can just fly spacecraft to becoming like university educated and modern civilization founding apes. Just glossed over that, but it is saying it's an alien planet. But then at the end of the film, of course, it connects it back to Earth. It is really weird. 1 star. This is a beautiful film to watch and much better than the recent trilogy, which are totally far-fetched and not a patch on the originals. I completely disagree. I don't know what they're talking about here. However, it only gets 1 star due to the goddamn awful ending that undermines all the good bits before. No wonder there was never a sequel. You know what? If you took away that crazy, illogical nonsense ending, this movie would still be rotten as hell. That wasn't the only thing wrong with this. Half a star. The best part is when there is an awkward kiss between Mark Wahlberg and a woman in full ape makeup without control of her lips. Yeah, and Tim Burton wanted them to actually have a full-on romance and have sex too. Wow. 1 star. Awkward and misguided. This reboot is entirely lost, and the ending will leave you laughing and scratching your head. Yeah. 2.5 stars. Entertaining if you don't think about it too much or you're asleep. 2.5 stars. Many years in the waiting. Finally, the Planet of the Apes remake made it on the screen after years and years of lingering. It ended up with a Burton-directed, Wahlberg-starring meh film. In this remake, an ape constantly referred to as a monkey that is being trained to fly spaceships is lost, and Mark Wahlberg's character Leo goes after him only to find himself in the future. Like the original, he is chased by the apes and rounded up with a group of primitive humans. Yeah, it's a synopsis. It's completely a lot more boring and illogical than that even suggests. 2.5 stars. This does not hold a candle to the original and never really tries to. More of a sequel, reimagined sequel to the original. Mark Wahlberg is miscast, but the apes are a delight, with Tim Roth delivering a menacing portrayal, along with a chilling if confusing last scene. No, Tim Roth doesn't deliver a menacing portrayal. Tim Roth acts totally over the top, ridiculous. His villain is so crazy, it's almost a parody of villains, and it's laugh out loud stupid. It's a complete fail for Tim Roth. I don't know what he was thinking or why the director didn't rein him in somehow. It's completely stupid. 2.5 stars. This reimagining of the 1968 classic starts on the right foot with a captivating introduction that differs from the originals. Captivating like Mark Wahlberg, like jumping into a spaceship and flying off without even screwing his helmet on all the way. Also, Rick Baker's makeup and prosthetics are very good, and Paul Giamatti is terrific. Yet somehow the film falls short. Somehow? It can't measure up to the original narratively or thematically, and therefore emerges as both less captivating and more superficial. But even without making this comparison, it's haphazardly written and only mildly thrilling at best. It's not thrilling at all, it's boring. It's trying to be thrilling, it's trying to do action sequences that are just boring. It's got apes attacking that are on wires and, jumping around on wires, and there's nothing exciting about this thing. When Mark Wahlberg is being chased out into the wilderness by the apes, it's so boring you just wanted to check out at that point. Like, It was pointless. 1.5 stars. Tim Burton put this development hell movie in theaters, and it sent us to hell. Tim, why did you make this when you should have made another Edward Scissorhands movie? I agree. He was the worst possible director to choose for this. I don't know how this happened. It's a disaster. 0.5 star. Just an atrocious movie. 2 hours of my life I will never get back. Yeah, it's 2 hours. That's the thing. It is actually 2 hours long. It's boring. 1.5 stars. A boring slog of a movie with an ending that makes absolutely no sense at all. The costumes and makeup are good, but apart from Tim Roth and Michael Clark Duncan's performances, the rest are forgettable, being particularly hampered by a terrible script and some weird action sequences. I'll say that Michael Clark Duncan's, you know, the fact that he's so well known and his voice is so well known in other things, when he's like cast as a gorilla in this, it's kind of just cringy and weird to me. It doesn't actually feel like, it doesn't matter what he would have done or how well he's performing. It's just cringy just listening to him talk as a gorilla. It's just bizarre to me. It was always cringy to me. I think it actually detracts from the movie. It's bad casting choice. 2 stars. This was a terrible remake. The makeup was good and some of the action was decent, but the plot was forgettable and the acting was not good. This is one of the worst Planet of the Apes movies, 3.8 out of 10. Yeah, it is the worst. It's worse than even the sequels of the 70s. They're better than this. 3 stars. It is what everyone knew it would be, a corny late 90s, early 2000s remake of a classic. It's a fun concept and it's okay to watch after you have seen the other movies. Do not let this be your first Planet of the Apes movie. Don't let it be your last either. For God's sakes, don't even watch it, okay? I recommend not watching it. 4 stars. I like this movie. It was good. Don't listen to those emo Tim Burton fans that only want to watch movies that make you want to commit suicide or cut yourself. Tim can make a decent movie too without all that other dark crap. This was a good movie. No, Tim Burton was on cocaine or something. No, it's not like an emo, cringy, dark thing. It is a little visually dark, but it's completely stupid and illogical. It's more stupid and illogical than Beetlejuice or The Nightmare Before Christmas or anything that would just strike you as being stupid and illogical right up front. This thing expects you to take it serious and it just turns into stupid, illogical nonsense. It's insulting. 3.5 stars. It lacks a lot of the satirical nuance of the original film, replacing it instead with more sci-fi and action, and is pretty much totally unnecessary as a result, but it's enjoyable, unsubstantial popcorn nonsense nonetheless. Wrong. I don't agree. It doesn't even get to 2 stars. 2.5 stars. Unnecessary remake in Spanish. I'll take your word for it. 2 stars. A pointless remake which removes all the intelligence, character, and charm of the original. Gone are the social commentary and satire. In their place, generic blockbuster tropes and half-hearted hero's journey with a bland protagonist. I'll agree with that. The original movie had different casts of apes, like the orangutans were the judicial branch and the intellectuals. The apes, the gorillas were the military and the generals of the military, and the chimpanzees were like the regular scientists or worker bees of the society. They were skilled artists and trades members, and it was like a caste system but done with apes, and it was done well, and it's obvious, and it gets the point across. This one has like these different types of apes, but it kind of totally wastes them. It has them all eating at the same dinner tables. It has them all intermarried and having relations with each other, and it makes no sense. Like, it takes elements from the 1968 film and just pointlessly wastes them and does nothing interesting with them, and it's just off-putting and insulting. Let me continue on this one. The supporting cast are good actors and are more entertaining, although aren't given much to challenge them. They look better than the old films, but this is inferior in every other regard. Yeah, the makeup is better. The prosthetic or makeup or whatever they use to make them look like apes, that's far better than the original. But as far as the characters being more effective, the 1968 film had it down. This one, they're completely boring and forgettable. One star. Well, this was a total letdown. I had some hope for this film, what with Tim Burton being involved and me having fond memories of the original 1968 film. Now I really just want those 2 hours of my life back. Yeah, if you're a fan of the 1968 film, especially if you're old enough to remember it when it was new, this is very insulting. Like, you're mad about this. Half a star. Tim Burton's effed up Planet of the Apes. Yeah, exactly. It's not even Tim Burton in a Tim Burton enjoyable way. It's just like he's on cocaine and screwed up one of his movies. 3 stars. Over the years, I've grown a little more fond of this film version of Pierre Boulaire's classic novel, more of a reimagining of the source material as opposed to a remake of the 1968 sci-fi masterpiece. I hated this movie when it first came out. Funny thing was, at this time I wasn't quite fond of the original movie. I love them all now because I understand them. This movie's sets and art design are top-notch. Rick Baker's work on the ape makeup is second to none, as well as performances by Tim Roth. Wrong. Tim Roth, okay, if you want to say Helena Bonham Carter did good, I agree she did. Tim Roth, he was pathetic. He was pathetic. Like, miscast. He was over the top. It was stupid over the top, shark jump villain type stuff. It was more like comedy than a villain. And it was stupid, and his character was illogical and stupid on top of it as well. So I completely disagree. Um, the sets and art design are good. Well, maybe the art design is good, but like I said, a lot of it, the CGI is fuzzy and it's dim. So I don't know how great this really is. I know people say it is. I don't see it. Half a star. My God, this is awful. I felt like I was throwing up in my mouth the entire movie. 2 stars. Impressive cinematography does not even come close to redeem this bizarre, dull, and unnecessary reboot. You know, the cinematography is not even impressive. Um, it's just weird, and it's completely, and it's certainly any action sequence towards the end, there's nothing impressive about this at all. It's completely stock action movie boring. So I disagree even on that. 2 stars. Tim Burton's remake of Planet of the Apes is such a butchered, misguided, and thoroughly unappealing effort that I was surprised that he made such a bad movie, as his movies are usually very good. The costumes are admittedly very good, but Mark Wahlberg's performance here is so bad. The film is overly dark and action-orientated, and the plot is one giant, incomprehensible nonsense, leading to one of the director's worst films and one of the worst remakes I've seen. I'll agree almost all the way with that, but not with the Mark Wahlberg being bad in this. Mark Wahlberg was just playing Mark Wahlberg, so I'm sure like he's passable as Mark Wahlberg. He didn't bring this down. I think if you had cast somebody else, if you had even put the original Charlton Heston, a younger Charlton Heston in his prime, into the role that Mark Wahlberg had in this would have been a disaster all the same, just as bad, just as rotten. It wouldn't have been an ounce better because this thing fails on every level aside from the actors. Mark Wahlberg is the least of this film's problem. 1 star. The original 1968 Planet of the Apes is a classic and always will be. It was new for the time and was an extremely fresh and exciting look at the future world. Is this a good film? No, not at all. This isn't even hilariously bad. It's just a flat-out terrible film. The script is the worst. 30 years ago, this film would have been great, but this is supposed to be a serious film, and the way it is presented doesn't allow it to be taken seriously. This looks like a film that should have been made in the 80s. Yeah, it wants you to take it serious, but there's nothing in here that you can seriously believe in. It is bad. It could have been redone as a comedy. If Tim Burton had done this as one of his dark comedies, this would have been fantastic. Mark Wahlberg would have had a chance to ham it up. The villain would have worked better. But no, Tim Burton did this as a straight story. And he's not known for that. He's known for doing dark comedy. So what the hell happened to him? Was it drugs? Like, I just keep asking that because I don't understand what he did here. 3 stars. A stirring intro theme from the master Danny Elfman and great performances, makeup effects fade through the rather unintriguing story. Unintriguing, boring. Yeah, but 3 stars, it ain't worth 3 stars. No way. 1.5 stars. Probably Burton's worst movie, which says a lot. Some kind of remake also, putting men into the roles of slaves while dumb apes rule the so-called little world. Seldom does Wahlberg carry a movie, but in this case it really isn't his fault, even though his acting is horrible. Yeah, if you're not a Mark Wahlberg fan, then yeah, he's just horrible. But no, he didn't do bad in this. It's just he just didn't do anything good. He just played Mark Wahlberg. He just played himself. So I don't know. Did he know this movie was going to be horrible? Probably not, because he knew, and you know that he knew that The Happening would be horrible. Yet he kind of had fun with it and made it funny. He didn't do that here. 1 star. This movie takes the perfect message and thought provoking commentary of the original source and gives it an incredibly insufferable and insulting spin. There are more holes in this plot than in a beehive, and the only things that keep from the original is either handled poorly or made fun of. The action scenes are weirdly choreographed and serve no purpose, and every single one of these great actors has nothing of substance to work with. Sure, Tim Roth seems to have a lot of fun playing his role. I'll agree almost all the way with that. 2 stars, it's a good movie to watch. Not on this planet. 2 stars, an inferior remake that lacks the political undercurrent of the original film. Right. But there's a lot more wrong with it than just that. 2 stars, reinventing a classic film is one thing, but if you're going to remake something beloved by film fans worldwide, do it for a reason. This Planet of the Apes reboot brings little to nothing new to the series with a brutally dull outcome. Look, it's easier said than done. Remakes and reboots have a lot of pressure and usually wind up being a waste of time, but there was serious potential here. With Tim Burton coming off a few solid films with Johnny Depp and box office success with Batman, yeah, you would think he would do something here, but he just proves that he screws up bad. 1.5 stars. Aside from the impressive makeup jobs, Planet of the Apes doesn't have much to offer. The plot is bland and predictable, with a heavy-handed message and an unnecessarily confusing ending. The acting is over the top and uneven as well. This doesn't feel like a Tim Burton movie, which could be a good thing because Burton should distance himself from this mess as much as possible. Yeah, he should be ashamed of what he did here. 4.5 stars. This is one of Tim Burton's best movies. Really, are you his fanboy or are you related to him? Did he tell you to come here and say this? Because please. Um, 27% audience score. I think that's accurate. 44% tomato meter. I don't know how it's this high. I don't know why this isn't like 5%. I just don't understand these critics. I never will. I guess that's half the fun of Rotten Tomatoes. So anyway, I've made my point and I will see you again on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.